Have you ever tried to say something simple in Spanish like I go or I do and then realized that the verb doesn't follow the regular patterns you've learnt? You're not alone. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest hurdles for beginner learners, which are irregular verbs. Welcome to Spanglish Friends, the podcast for true beginner Spanish learners.
Hola amigos, I'm Val, your experienced Spanish teacher and co-host from Venezuela.
And I'm Em, your Australian co-host who's been learning Spanish for 10 years.
We'll help you get confident listening and speaking beginner Spanish with content you can actually use in real-life conversations.
Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on socials at Spanglish_friends. Let's get started.
Comencemos. Bienvenidos de vuelta, bienvenidos de nuevo amigos. Welcome back to episode 37 of the Spanglish Friends podcast.
Bienvenidos, friends. Today we're diving into the mundo, the world of irregular verbs, those sneaky little words that don't follow the regular AR, ER, or IR conjugation patterns that you've been practicing as a beginner.
Exactly. We'll show you what irregular verbs are, which ones you really need to know as a beginner, and some powerful hacks to remember them faster. With this, amigos, you're seriously bringing your Spanish skills to the next level.
Yes, irregular verbs are so important. They come up in everyday Spanish. As always, friends, we'll guide today's learning with our tres preguntas clave, our 3 key questions of the lesson.
Which are, pregunta número 1, ¿qué son los verbos irregulares? What are the irregular verbs? Pregunta número 2. ¿Cuáles son los verbos irregulares más comunes que necesito saber como principiante? What are the most common irregular verbs that you need to know as a beginner? And last one, pregunta número 3. ¿Cuáles son los trucos para aprenderlos más rápido? What are the hacks you can use to conjugate irregular verbs more easily?
Love it, Profe Val. And before we dive into our learnings, let's warm up your listening skills with our little mini conversation, una conversación pequeña.
Sí, today Em and I are going to be talking as we were discussing what we're currently doing right now, using a number of common irregular verbs. And as always, amigos, grab a pen and write down 3 words you recognize. This is a fun way to see how your listening skills are improving each week. Amiga, entonces, ¿estás lista?
Por supuesto, amiga. Comencemos. ¿Qué haces, Val?
Amiga, ahora estoy limpiando la casa y después voy al gimnasio. ¿Y tú, qué haces?
Estoy trabajando y después tengo que estudiar español, pero no quiero, estoy un poco cansada.
Pero puedes descansar hoy y mañana puedes estudiar.
Tienes razón, Val. Buena idea.
Amigos, in this conversation, we used 5 irregular verbs: estar, ir, tener, querer, and poder. We are going to teach you in 10 minutes why they are so important, how to use them, and you'll be able to understand the whole conversation top to tail.
Woohoo! Let's do it. Start the clock, starting with pregunta número 1. ¿Qué son los verbos irregulares? What exactly are irregular verbs, Profe Val?
In Spanish, most verbs, amigos, follow a pattern. We've learned this before. They have a specific way to be conjugated, right? We learned this previously.
That's right. For example, the verb hablar, we conjugate with yo hablo, tú hablas, él habla. These are all regular verbs with regular conjugation.
Exactly, with predictable patterns. However, irregular verb are the ones that they break the pattern. Something changes. Maybe the stem changes, maybe the ending changes.
That's right. Spanish likes to keep us on our toes. But hey, we do it in English too. Like think of, for example, of saying I go in English, right? We say I go and then we say I went. That is irregular, right? We don't say I goed somewhere, right? It's the same kind of idea that exists in Spanish. Not all the patterns remain the same for the same verb.
For example, take the verb ir, to go. It doesn't follow any regular rule in Spanish. If we want to conjugate the verb ir with I, would be yo voy with you, tú vas with he, él va with we, nosotros vamos, and with they or you all would be ellos van and ustedes van. Can you see how it changes?
Yes, this V suddenly appears out of nowhere. It's not in the verb ir, but it just starts to appear, right? Totally irregular. None of these conjugations look like IR, the verb. But you will hear these used all the time because ir is one of the most common verbs in Spanish. Pregunta número 2. ¿Cuáles son los verbos irregulares más comunes que necesito saber como principiante? Let's talk about the most common irregular verbs that you need to know, essential to any beginner Spanish learner.
There are 7 that you'll hear probably every single day in Spanish conversations. They are ser, estar, tener, which means to have, ir, to go, hacer, to do or to make, poder, can, and decir, to say or to tell. Ser and estar, I'm going to stop here for a moment. They mean to be if we translate directly English to Spanish. However, they mean something different in Spanish. If you don't know them yet, I would highly recommend you to go to episodes 12 and 14 because there we explain them all top to tail.
Yes, ser and estar definitely deserve their own episodes. But let's talk through these other irregular verbs with examples.
Number 1, ser, meaning to be, we can use it. Yo soy profesora, to say your profession. I am a teacher.
Number 2, estar. For example, estoy cansada. I'm tired. Or estoy en casa. I'm at home.
Great. Number 3, tener. Tengo un perro. I have a dog.
Number 4, which we introduced before, ir, which means to go. For example, voy al cine. I'm going to the cinema.
Number 5, hacer. Hago ejercicio todos los días. I do exercise every day.
Number 6, decir. For example, digo la verdad. I tell the truth.
And number 7, poder. Por ejemplo, ¿puedo ir a tu casa? This is a question. Can I go to your house? ¿Puedo ir a tu casa? These verbs, amigos, as we mentioned before, they don't follow the standard rules. They are used so often in daily conversation that you'll pick them up fast.
Definitely. And once you start using them, friends, in real conversations, they'll stick naturally.
You might also come across other irregular verbs like querer, to want, poner, to put. But if you start with those first 7 we taught you, you are already halfway there.
That's right. But the best part is, Profe Val, is that irregular verbs, they tend to follow some little patterns. And once you learn one, you start to be able to guess what other similar verbs might be irregular, developing your Spanish tingle, your spingle.
That brings us to our favorite part, the 2 hacks we have for you to start recognizing irregular verbs. With pregunta número 3. ¿Cuáles son los trucos para aprenderlos más rápido? What are the 2 tricks you can start using to learn irregular verbs?
That's right, amigo. So how do you know if a verb is irregular? This is the question, right? How do we make these new irregular verbs stick in your brain?
Hack number 1, truco número 1. Focus on the yo form first, amigos. That's usually where the irregularity happens. For example, yo hago is I do, but then with the other pronouns, the stem stays the same. Tú haces, hace, hacemos, hacen, etc. It follows the same pattern of hacer. Hack number 2. Truco número 2. Use verbs in short daily sentences instead of memorizing lists. Say phrases like voy al trabajo, I go to work. Tengo un perro, I have a dog. Hago un café, I'm making a coffee. Digo una palabra, I say a word. When you use them in real context with phrases, rather than just doing the list of irregular verbs, your brain learns them as chunks, not isolated words.
I definitely made this mistake as a beginner learner. I used to print out all the verb tables, be like, right, I need to learn all the irregularities, but there is just so many, right? It's about developing your spingle, right? Looking at that yo form can help as a starting place, and then just do short, simple sentences to start committing them to memory. Next episode, friends, we're actually going to go into some further hacks to teach you how to develop your spingle, right? To go off and tell you, this verb could have some irregular conjugations. So make sure you tune in next week for that episode.
Super important during this episode, we are going to help you develop your spingle. Por supuesto. Okay, amigos, let's break down our mini conversation, nuestra conversación pequeña from before, line by line, so the puzzle pieces can click in your mind when it comes to using irregular verbs.
Let's make the click. First, I asked Val, ¿Qué haces, Val? I asked, what are you doing, Val? The verb hacer becomes haces here. This is one of the regular conjugations of the ER verb hacer, versus if I use the first person of hacer, which is yo hago. It's not yo hago, okay? It's yo hago. Brings to life, friends, that not every conjugation of the verb is irregular. Just some might be.
Then I responded with, ahora estoy limpiando la casa. Right now, ahora estoy limpiando. I'm cleaning. Limpiar is the verb to clean. La casa, the house. Then I added, y después voy al gimnasio. And then, afterwards, y después voy, I go al gimnasio, to the gym. Voy is from the verb ir, which means to go, and it's super irregular. There comes the V where it's nowhere. I ask her back, ¿Y tú? ¿Qué haces? And you, what are you doing?
Ir is one of those verbs where all the conjugations are irregular, not just the yo form. And I replied with, estoy trabajando. I'm working using that irregular verb estar, estoy trabajando. Then I said, y después, and afterwards, tengo que estudiar español. Breaking this down, I said, I have to, tengo que. Tengo comes from the verb tener. Obviously, there's no G in the verb tener, but the yo form of tener is irregular. Tengo que. I have to estudiar, study Spanish. Pero no quiero. Pero no quiero. I don't want to. Quiero comes from the verb querer, right? This is an irregular conjugation, the yo form of the verb querer.
And as she didn't want to study Spanish, I gave her a little advice by saying, Emi, pero puedes descansar hoy y mañana puedes estudiar. Breaking the sentence down. You can, tú puedes, descansar hoy, rest today. Y en mañana, tomorrow, puedes estudiar. You can study. Poder is can or to be able to, and I conjugate it. Tú puedes descansar, to rest, and tú puedes estudiar. You can study.
Nice, Val. And lastly, I added, tienes razón, Val. This is a phrase which means you're right. And it's a phrase I use all the time in Spanish. Tienes razón. Like, you're right. Buena idea. Good idea.
In summary, amigos, in that tiny conversation, we used multiple verbs. We used hacer, to do, estar, to be, ir, to go, tener, to have, querer, to want, and poder, can, all irregular verbs.
Which proves just how common these irregular verbs are and just how much you need them, Spanglish friends, to be able to talk really natural, fluent beginner's Spanish. It's so important that you learn them.
And amigos, this time you did it. Awesome. You just learned how to master one of the trickiest parts of Spanish grammar, actually. And let's go over las tres cosas claves, the three key important things you learned today.
Vamos, let's cement them in your mind. Grab a pen and write them down. The first thing you learned, Spanglish friends, was what are irregular verbs?
You learned that they are verbs that just don't follow the normal conjugation patterns we've learned before. They are the rebels of the Spanish.
That's right. And the second thing you learnt was the most common irregular verbs that you would encounter as a beginner and that you need to know as a beginner.
You learned 7 common ones, including ser and estar, which mean to be, tener, which means to have, ir, which means to go, hacer, to do, decir, to say or to tell, and poder, which means to be able to or can.
And last but not least, you learnt 2 key trucos, 2 key hacks to make learning irregular verbs easy and you don't have to Google them all the time.
You learned that you can firstly focus on the yo form to figure it out if it is irregular and start to use them in context to start memorizing these common irregular verbs more with phrases rather than just the verb alone on a list.
Perfect, Val. That is so cool. And you know what's even more cool is our Spanglish friend of the week. And this week's shout out goes to Kata, who commented on TikTok some of her favorite alternative ways to ask someone what are their weekend plans in Español.
You see, she said, ¿para dónde el fin de? Nos vemos el fin de? Las posibilidades son infinitas. And she was trying to give us different options. ¿Para dónde el fin de? This is more like, where are we going this weekend if we translate directly? Nos vemos el fin de? Let's see each other on the weekend. She gave many multiple examples about asking what you are going to do on the weekend. That's awesome.
Yes, and you might have not heard that before, friends, that shortening of fin de la semana as fin de. That is a common abbreviation that native Spanish speakers use to talk about the weekend. So use that in your vocabulary of fin de as well. Moving on to your reto de la semana, your challenge of the week. Get involved right now so you can put what you've learned today into practice, make it stick in your mind, and hey, you could even get a shout out in an upcoming episode.
This week, we want you to write a sentence in Spanish using at least one irregular verb from today. For example, you could say, Tengo un hermano. I have a brother. Voy al trabajo. I go to work. Quiero un café. I want a coffee. Post them in the comments so we can check them and give you a shout out in our next episode.
Yes. And remember to tune in next week, friends, because again, we're going to make sure you never have to Google irregular verbs, or we're going to try our hardest, right, to help you develop your spingle, your Spanish tingle, so you can have even more tricks up your sleeve to recognize at a glance, is this verb irregular or not?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to having this episode. And amigos, that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, practice makes progress, not perfection.
Until next time, hasta luego.
Thanks for listening to Spanglish Friends. We're both so proud of the time you're investing to level up your Spanish skills.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, follow us, leave a rating, or tell a friend about the show. It helps our awesome community grow.
Join fellow beginner Spanish learners by following us on Instagram and TikTok at Spanglish_friends.
Congratulations on taking another step in your Spanish learning journey.
Hasta la próxima, amigos.